Hi, my name is Bruce and am part of a Zoom worship community and wanted to give you a few tips on how to not get Zoom bombed. Zoom bombing has been happening a lot in the Zoom community for a while, especially in business communities, but churches with COVID-19 having people to shift worship onto online platforms, this is new. So I want to give a few tips if you're using Zoom for your worship experience on how you can mitigate the possibility of Zoom bombing. We know that it's happened quite a bit. So this isn't just being paranoid about something that isn't going to happen, but this is actually happening. And it can be pretty traumatizing for people when you show up and there are bodies that you may not want to see fully. There's racist rants. There's all kinds of ways that people come into these. I think churches are prime targets right now during this season because everybody knows that we have gone online. And the struggle with trying to lock down our services so that people we don't know can't get in, or we somehow keep track of everyone, is that that's not how we normally hold worship. Worship is an opportunity to invite the community, and everybody comes in and we deal with distractions. We just now need to learn how to deal with them differently. So we do want to, I think there's a tension. We want to begin to think about how do we continue to reach out to new folks that we may have not connected to us in the past. So we want to make things easily accessible and a way for people to join worship, just like it is when we meet in person. We want to lower the technology barrier because we know that many churches, you add more and more steps and it becomes harder and harder to connect. And the reality is that this is a great chance to again meet new people, reconnect folks. And so there's an evangelism component to this that I think we need to always keep in mind, that if you believe that your version of the gospel and what you're preaching and your worship is worth sharing in the world, we want more people to know it. So we hold all these things in that tension. And so every community is going to have to figure out exactly how you want to go about this. So I'm going to give you some technical pieces, though, so that you can decide what you may or may not want to do. So on what you're probably seeing on the screen now is I have a kind of a tester group and myself, and I'm going to share my screen with you and start with some pieces about how we go about doing some of the technical changes. So I'm going to share my desktop now with you all. So I'm going to share. And okay, so now they're here and you're going to see, I'm going to show you my screen here. And what you need to know is that there are a few things that you can do in the settings, as well as when you're in the meeting and then during your settings. I want to show you a few things to do while you're in the meeting to be able to mitigate some of the ways in which people may try to Zoom bomb you and get into your meetings. The primary thing you want to be able to know is go down to the bottom here in your managed participants. And there are a few things in here that are important for you to know. The first is the mute all button. So when you mute all, that mutes everybody in the conversation. And in smaller groups, you can go ahead and allow people to unmute themselves. But when you're doing a larger worship service, uncheck this box, which means that people can't unmute themselves. So you won't have anybody, it takes away the possibility of somebody jumping in and saying whatever they want to say. So unmute that and then hit yes. And that way everybody is muted, but they can't unmute themselves. Now, every time that you hit mute all, you have that option again. And so if later on you do want to have everybody, then you're okay. You mute it, you mute everybody, and then you click it again. So that mute all is important. That's a kind of a basic one. Go ahead and do that. The other thing is around sharing. So if you go down to the bottom of your share thing and you hit the side arrow, there's advanced sharing options. There are a couple of things that you can do here. So the first thing is who can share. Really, the best way to avoid anybody jumping into your worship service with things that you don't want folks to see is you share only host. You switch it to only host, as well as one participant at a time. But when you have this only host can share, that will limit who can share their screen. And that's one of the ways that people will Zoom bomb you, is showing their screen, either themselves in different different things, different forms of clothing or non-clothing, or they'll share pictures and images, and we don't want that to traumatize anybody. The other thing is here is to share, and then you can, you also want to make it so that you can't, sorry, we go back here. You want to make it so you can take people's screens on and off. You want to make sure that you understand how to do host and to ask to start screen, and you can turn people's off. So I've asked to start the screen. So I'm going to go over here, and now you can see that that person shared their screen. I conversely can say stop video, and it would stop their video. So get used to using those controls as well. Okay, so those are a few of them. The other one that is important to know, and let me find it in here, is, oh, where did it go? Is, nope, 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 nope. There is a lock meeting where I can't find it now. Of course, I just had it earlier, where you can lock down the meeting so that only at a certain point, then your meeting is no longer open to other people. Oh, here it is. So the lock meeting is in the participants down at the bottom, and you can see these other options here. You can allow people to rename themselves, unmute themselves. You may want to unclick those things in case folks are renaming themselves something inappropriate. Lock meeting here, what that means is that no new meet people can join the meeting. So you would hit yes, your meeting is now locked down so that no new people can join that meeting. And then you can also lock the screen share to make sure that only you can share your screen. So there's a couple ways you want to make sure to do that. So unshare your screen, or make you only can share your screen, as well as lock your meeting. The other thing that's important that I'm going to talk about a little bit more later is over here is to be able to make someone else a host or a co-host. So right now, because I logged into my same accounts, I'm a co-host automatically. Now I could go over here and take that away. I take away their co-host, and so that second screen is no longer a co-host. But then I can go back and make them a co-host. It's important that you have more than one person be your co-host. So there's you who's running the slides or overall control, and then you have a few co-hosts, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. All right, so I'm gonna zip out of here. The other thing I want to share with you is then about how we do your Zoom settings in the actual kind of in your meeting setup, your settings. So you go to your account here, you go to my account, and that'll open up your account. This is mine, and you want to go to settings. So we go to settings. I'm just going to walk through these, which I think are really important for you to do. A couple of things you may want to do to avoid your Zoom bombing. One is around video and when they start. So I always put video participants to have them not start with it on, because one, that avoids them any embarrassing possibilities that they didn't know the video was going to come right on and they weren't quite ready. But also this enables people not to just jump in automatically. You can use yours on if you want. Coming down a little bit more, these are important pieces. So I do a join before host because I never get on right on time, and I'm not going to start the meeting earlier. So I let folks join before me. There's a little bit of danger in that because it lets people interact ahead of time. So you may want to turn that off. But if you turn that off, you need to do something else, which I will talk about in a minute. So you're going to go down all these. Now, some people are using passwords, which is fine. Again, that's another level of technology that people have to, another step they have to take. So I don't use passwords just because I know many in my congregation, that would just be one more thing they got to try to plug into their phones or their computers. And so we don't do passwords for us. So none of those are clicked for the things that I do. I do mute them upon entry. So I mute everybody when they come in, which is important to do. And then as you get to the bottom here, you can decide what you want to do. So there's chats. You can decide everybody gets to be in the chat room, which is fine. You can also decide whether you want to have private chats or not. Now, I think private chats are great because certain people want to interact with themselves. You can also see by allowing private chats that if somebody gets into that chat room and decides they want to privately harass somebody, that could be an issue. So you just have to decide if you want to use and enable that feature. I would save them all, so that's important to do. Coming down here, you want to enable the co-host. You want to enable people to be able to be co-hosts. So you want to make sure that you enable this one here so that you can assign co-hosts. I'm going to talk about co-hosts later at the very end. A couple of other things are not all that important other than the screen sharing, who can share, host only, who can share, host only. I leave it on all participants in my main setting because I do run a bunch of meetings where I do want people to share. But when you get into your meeting, remember you can change that setting while you're meeting, once your meeting is up and going. So there's a few other ones in there that are important to see. Want to make sure that we grab all of them for you. There's a bunch of here that you can decide these are not having to do with Zoom bombing or not, but just a few other pieces. The one that's important to include here is join from your browser. That's a good one to put in, which is not a Zoom bombing thing, but it just lets people watch the video feed easier. But the one book that is really important at the end is this, is to whether you're going to allow people to rejoin the meeting. Well, where'd it go? Oh, where I missed it. Where did it go? Where did it go? Did I miss it? I'm going back up. This is a very well done. Here we go. Allow and remove participants to rejoin. I do not check that because what could happen is if you turn this on, you're going to kick somebody out and they're going to jump back on. You're going to kick somebody out and you're going to jump back on. That's not something that is easily done while you're in the meeting. So allow removed participants to rejoin. Do not click on that. Let them. They'll have to do that themselves. All right. So that's one set of settings. The other set of settings that you need to look at is your actual meetings. So you'll go back up here and you'll go to your meeting. And let's say we're going to schedule a new meeting. And I'm going to schedule test Zoom bombing avoidance. Right? So you're going to set all of your things, all of your whatever you're going to do them, whether it be those aren't Zoom bombing things. But once you get down to the bottom here, the meeting options I think is really important. So some people are using what's called a waiting room. So if you click on this waiting room, what that does is it lets people sit in a room, a virtual room, and then when the host joins and assigns co-hosts, then they can let people into each of those meetings. So you'll look at your participant screen and you'll allow people in, you'll allow people in, you'll allow people in. So that is really important because you know who's coming in. Now the difficulty is that you may not always know who all the people are. So there's no guarantee that if you see those people in the waiting room, you actually know if they're there for nefarious purposes or not. And so if you use this, I'm not sure how helpful it is, other than people can't interact beforehand. So if you enable the waiting room, you want to take off enable join before host to allow people to be in this waiting room together. So that's an important thing to do. Now, the other piece that's up here that is important to look at is whether you're going to require a password or you're going to require registration. If you want to do registration, you click here under required, and it'll generate for you, and I'll show you in a minute, an invite. The other thing you can do is you can require a meeting password, and you can set the password. So the meeting comes up, they got to know the password in order to get in. Now, both of those are just one more level of technology, right, that people are having to get through. Now, it's a safety mechanism, which is great, but it often is a way that may hold some people back. So there's a couple of tricks you can do around this. I never require a meeting password just because I just feels like it's too much. Now, the required registrations here, I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to hit save, and now we have a meeting that has here a registration link. And if you share that out, so if I click on this link, you're going to see that this is what comes up. There's a registration page. Somebody fills that out, they're going to get the link emailed back to them. Now, what you can do is you save this link right here, save that link so you can share that out as a registration link that you'll share widely with the public. Then what you do, so save that, right? But then what you do is you go back and you edit this meeting and you take the required registration off. Now, I'm going to save it. And what happens is you now have a direct link here. You have a direct link. Close this thing, what's going on? You have a direct link here that gets people right to the meeting. But that registration link that you saved earlier, that still works as a registration link. So you're, in essence, creating two links. One has one level of technology. That's the one you should share out, send that out to everybody. If strangers are going to get it, that's what you want to get. And then this one is one that is a direct link into the meeting. And so you share that one with your congregation. Now, is it fail safe? No. Does this link that gets you direct in, can that get out? Yes. But it is one way to separate it a little bit. Again, I don't think most of the people who are Zoom bombing are going to want to work that hard to get into any one particular church. Now, if they're targeting you as a particular church, they may do that. But at a certain level, the more we lock this down, the harder it is for our own people to get there. And I'm going to err on the side that we can handle when people kind of come in and just like we would at church, when folks are being instructive in church, you figure out faithful pastoral ways to handle disruption in the church. The last thing I'm going to leave you with, I'm going to stop sharing here. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Um, the most important thing you can do is assign what we call tech deacons. So once you start the meeting, know that you have 2 or 3 people who you trust that you can make co-host. There's a couple reasons that it's important to have co-hosts. One is if your computer crashes, those folks can continue to run the meeting. The second thing is to get people that are really adept at using the chat room and give them permission to kick people out. So if they see something that's happening, somebody alerts them, boom, they can kick them out. And so they're not waiting for you or someone else to give them permission. And you deal with the fallout. If they happen to kick out, your mom, whatever, you'll deal with the fallout later. But give them permission, because what we want is we want them to have their eyes on the screens, watching people. And then if they see anything that feels dodgy, they just kick those folks out and you deal with it later. But so assign tech deacons. Not only do they help you not have to focus on everything, but they're able to be much more present in that chat room and on the screen so that they can find anything if you get Zoom bombed at any time. All right, so that's a lot of stuff. Watch this thing over and over again if you need to. Lots of different settings. You got to think through how you want to handle this. I hope you never have to use any of these things, but as we know, the church is not special, and when we gather, there are people that are going to target communities where they can share either their hateful language, or they can share inappropriate images and actions. And right now, churches are a prime target for that. So keep your guard up, but don't lock everything down so much that we become a fortress to anybody new. But just be wise. Make good choices around how you're using your Zoom. Feel free to join our Facebook group called Zoom Church, and you can just look that up on Facebook. And every Monday, we gather for some Zoom training for people who are using Zoom particular in their worship experience. Thank you much. Again, I'm Bruce Reyes-Chow. If you have any questions, feel free to look in the comments or anything. You can ask me, or you can find me at B Reyes-Chow on pretty much every social network out there. All right. Hope your worship goes well, and happy Zooming.